All right, folks. So while Premier Smith is doing incredibly important and powerful things in Alberta, Canada's state broadcaster is doing what they do. They sink even lower and lower. And yesterday they put out a ridiculous, pathetic, attempted hit job against Premier Smith. And this was just totally fell flat. Okay, so here is the report. The idea is that they, I guess, put in an access to information or freedom of information request and found out that Premier Smith's trip to Mar-a-Lago earlier this year to visit President Trump cost taxpayers about $10,000. That's the bombshell. $10,000 for Premier Smith's visit, and they try to drum this up into a huge controversy, like how dare she waste this money, and put on the whole. And this is fake news to a T. This is why the CBC has no credibility. This is why it needs to be defunded. This is one of the worst reports that I have seen. Just total fake news, trying to create a scandal where there is none, trying to just pick on one politician because they don't like her because she's just too conservative for the CBC or whatever, and it just completely backfires. So let's play this clip and I will walk you through just how terrible it is in case it wasn't obvious enough to you for just watching it, but I'll point out the extra obnoxious, ridiculous parts of it. Let's play this CBC report.
Well, as Canada's Prime Minister prepares for his meeting with Donald Trump, we're learning more today about a meeting in early January between Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith and Trump. Who went and how much did it cost? We know it took place at Trump's residence in Palm Beach, Florida. And as Julia Wong tells us, some critics are raising questions about whether taxpayers received good value for their money.
Alberta Premier Danielle.
Wait, just wait. Before we go to this reporter, you can just see the way she sets it up. Like, we are learning this information and some people are wondering if taxpayers get good value for their money. Give me a break. Give me an absolute break. $10,000 for a diplomatic meeting that actually had a huge consequences on Alberta and taxpayers, which I'll explain in a bit. But just the entire setup of this, again, just shows you how ridiculous the CBC. It's like they're cosplaying journalism, but it's really just anti-conservative activism, promoting the Carney Liberals at all costs. And it's just so transparently obvious. Okay, let's resume this clip.
Premier Danielle Smith has called her meeting at Mar-a-Lago with then President-elect Donald Trump constructive. Now more details are emerging about the trip itself. The visit in early January took place before Trump became president and came as a trade war with the United States loomed. Smith has said she emphasized the mutual importance of the U.S.-Canada energy relationship and that she had discussions with key allies. Documents obtained by CBC News through a Freedom of Information request outline Smith made the trip to Trump's Florida Golf Club with 2 government staffers and Alberta's senior representative to the United States. And records show the roughly 48-hour visit cost taxpayers more than $10,000.
What I asked the president was, do you want to buy more oil and gas from Canada? And he said yes.
Concerns have been raised about the cost and value of the trip. CBC News asked...
Just pause it right there. Pause right there. Concerns have been raised about the cost and the value. Really? By who? By which credible source? Is there like a huge uprising of concerned citizens saying, like, how dare she spend, $10,000, and she brought 2 staff, okay? Two staffers and the premier. They went all the way to Florida, had a whole bunch of meetings. I interviewed Premier Smith and I asked her about this. I asked her about a report that was in the Calgary Sun that when President Trump walked into the room at Mar-a-Lago, he has these big kind of state ballrooms, ballroom dinners, full of dignitaries and full of people who just want to meet the president. And when he saw Premier Smith, he beelined to her, went right up to her and started talking to her. And she confirmed that that was true and that they did have a constructive meeting. Think about, folks, just think about how much money the Ontario government, the federal government, every other government is spending on lobbyists, is spending on, like, literally just pouring out American-made alcohol that they had already purchased, right? Like, think about all the wastefulness that has gone into this insane elbows up movement, this mass hysteria over the United States, and then compare that to $10,000 for an incredibly constructive meeting that actually led to something tangible. Because remember, when Donald Trump announced the tariffs, it was 25% tariffs on Canada and only 10% on natural resources. That 15% savings in the tariff came directly because of Premier Smith and her meeting and her advocacy. That is a direct line between that savings. So yeah, $10,000, I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it, CBC. All right, let's play the rest of this ridiculous report.
Asked the Premier's office how long Smith had with Trump and why so many people were involved with the trip, but did not get a response.
So many people. There were 3 people. There were 3 people involved. They said Premier Smith and 2 of her advisors. So I'm sorry, but we're supposed to believe a 3-man team going to visit the President of the United States is like a large team? It's so ridiculous. Okay, and then they go to a political science professor here that's supposed to, somehow explain why this is a scandal. Let's resume the clip.
We're talking about a large sum of money, $10,000.
No, we're not.
To be spent for perhaps more people being involved.
Sorry, just pause it again. This is not a large sum of money. That's not a large sum of money. Okay, I looked it up, folks, because I like crunching numbers. The government of Alberta in 2025 is projected to spend, it anticipates spending $79 billion, $80 billion just in Alberta. Forget about the feds, forget about all the other provinces. Just the government of Alberta plans to spend $80 billion. $10,000 as a percentage of 80 billion, because yes, I crunched the numbers, it is 0.000012%. That's 4 zeros, 0.000012% of all provincial spending. So that is not a large sum by any extent of the imagination. It is nothing. It is absolutely nothing. And I would guess that universally Albertans would say that this was good value for money. 10 grand for a meeting one-on-one with President Trump that directly resulted in a reduced tariff by 15%. That will save Alberta's economy untold billions, okay? So the whole idea behind this segment is propaganda and lies, and the fact that they found a political science professor to pretend that this is a real thing, I mean, this is all a joke. Federally funded, finding a bunch of liberals who are all funded by the Carney Liberal government to pretend that anybody cares about this ridiculous story, again, just shows you how unnecessary the CBC is, how political it is, how partisan it is, and how just absolutely reprehensible it is that this thing continues to get funding. Okay, let's resume the clip.
To be spent for perhaps more people being involved than were necessary for what might have been a very brief exchange and had very little impact. So it's about the wise expenditure.
Very little impact. It had a direct impact. It had a direct impact in the tariff price. So this political science professor has no idea what she's talking about, or she's pretending that the thing that happened after this didn't actually happen, which again is just pathetic and shameful. Okay, resume.
Expenditure of scarce taxpayer dollars that comes into question in cases like this.
The Premier's office pointed to comments she's previously made, where she said her strategy was to meet with people who can influence the U.S. president. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
Okay, so just again, reason number 1005 why the CBC just should not be funded anymore. This is so ridiculous. They are trying to create a scandal out of nothing. Quick question. How much did it cost when Prime Minister Justin Trudeau went down to Mar-a-Lago? Did the CBC bother to FOI that as well? How about Doug Ford when he went down to Washington to meet with Howard Lutnick or other administration officials? How much did that cost? Oh, because the CBC doesn't actually care. Because when you're a liberal, you can get away with anything. If you're a conservative, they are going to all of a sudden become sleuths and try to safeguard every last penny that the taxpayer is on the hook for, right? When it comes to $1.5 billion for the CBC, no interest at all in whether the money is well spent or providing a service for Canadians. Of course not. But if the Premier of Alberta spends $10,000 to secure the top meeting with the top official, the most important person in the world, and especially when it comes to dealing with the tariffs that he himself is imposing, yeah, I'm going to say $10,000 for a meeting with President Trump by the Premier that literally changed the course of the tariffs for Alberta. I'm going to say that is good use of the money, better than all the lobbyists by the federal government and the Ontario government, better than any of the other things that they are trying to do. Danielle Smith actually had results. And again, this is why it brings me no joy to have to cover the CBC. It actually pains me to have to watch their reporting because it's so cringe and so bad. But folks, I just need you to know what they're reporting, what they're telling Canadians. You know, those poor Canadians who don't know that there is an alternative, who are sitting at home and they watch the CBC because they think that's the only option, and they're fed this propaganda and they're fed this absolute nonsense. It's honestly you can't really blame them for the way that they view the world, and the reason that they keep voting Liberals is because they're sucked into this propaganda vortex. And it is so shameful for a free country like Canada to have this kind of programming, which again is why the CBC has to go.